Welcome back, action takers, the After Hours Entrepreneur. Jeremy Slate joins the show today. He is the founder of Command Your Brand Media. He's the host of Create Your Own Life podcast. And what Jeremy does better than everyone else is he takes people and he puts them as guests on other shows so that they can be podcast celebrities. And as we know, as we look at data, podcasts are crushing. I think Joe Rogan's podcast is the biggest media show in the world. TV, radio, whatever. Podcasts are the future, and Jeremy really knows how to do that. So in today's episode, there's 3 key takeaways that I think you're really gonna wanna listen to. So one is he gives us a little bit of a launch pad into the mistakes and the learning he went through in building his business. He's gonna explain exactly how he was able to launch his podcast and get 10,000 downloads in the first month. 10,000 downloads in the first month. He's going to lay out the launch plan right here, which you definitely want to hear. And then he's also going to break down how to actually be a great guest. I don't know about you, but we've all heard being a guest on other podcasts is a great way to grow your business. It's a great way to grow your podcast. But there are some things that you need to do as a guest to build your business. Some things that I've actually never heard before. So you definitely are going to want to listen up for that. Now, before we bring Jeremy onto the show here, I just want to say that I know as a podcaster it can be really tough to build your show. You're in this dark, dank room, you're editing, you're reaching out for guests. It can feel lonely. Your significant other, your friends, they don't get it. I hear you. And I know it's hard. There's a lot to learn. I've recently launched a group coaching and mastermind program that I would love for you to be a part of. It's going to be phenomenal. I'm going to give you access to learning, mastermind, growth, promotional opportunities. It's going to be really powerful. And even if you're just listening and you don't want to be part of that, you can still contribute to the growth of the podcast and still be a member. So I'm going to put a link below. Head over to patreon.com/Mark Savant. That's patreon.com/Mark Savant. Go in your browser right now, www.patreon.com/Mark Savant. I'd really love for you to be part of this community. It's going to be fire. I'm very committed to helping you grow your podcast and grow your business. Listen, I've been producing podcasts for a long time for a lot of different people. And most people can't afford $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month for production. If you can, we need to talk. But I have got a really phenomenal offer and opportunity for you to get on the ground floor of this community. So head over to patreon.com/Mark Savant. I'll see you over there. Okay, without further ado, let's bring on Jeremy. Let's go. Yo, Jeremy, welcome to the After Hours Entrepreneur. How we doing?
Hey, man, thank you so much for having me. And, we just did an episode for my show, not long in between recording this one. And I'll say it again, man, like, I feel like you have the perfect, like, DJ, like, recording voice. You've got, like, all that cadence and excitement to it. It's just there, man.
Thanks. I actually picked that up from John Lee Dumas, came on my show. He said, Mark, enthusiasm is worth 15 IQ points. And I was like, all right, let's be enthusiastic. I want to be smart. I want to be smarter, at least by perception.
It's I guess what I do for myself then, man. I took an IQ test and it came up negative,
I'm sure. Well, listen, based on the first conversation we have, I know that you're lying. I know that can't be true. I know it can't be because you brought a lot of wisdom just in the questions that you were asking.
Well, thank you.
And leading. But I want to talk a little bit about your story, your
Sure.
origination story, right? Because nobody just wakes up in the morning and all of a sudden they have a business. So walk me back to how you actually started and founded your current business.
Online marketing does want you to believe that you can wake up tomorrow morning, make a whole bunch of money, and you could pay me $30,000 to coach you to do it. But anyway, I feel like that's every ad I've ever seen. But like, it's interesting, man. Like for me, I was always purely an academic in my life. Like that was like kind of where my brain was always at. I've been a competitive powerlifter since my teenage years. Though, I'm nowhere near as strong as I used to be. I was in like the 220 class. Now I'm like 165 just because, it's not fun walking around like that. But on the other side of it, I've always been an academic. I have my master's in ancient history. I have an undergrad degree in world religion and Catholic theology. And then I actually studied literature at New College, Oxford. So like total nerd, unable to write things that other people can understand. And that was actually the reason I started a podcast. Right out of school, I came out and I was teaching high school, and I got burnt out very, very quickly. And in 2012, my mom ended up having a really bad stroke, and it made me look at a lot of what I was doing, and I'm like, shoot, man, like I've been trying to do this my whole life, and I'm not happy. So I started looking for a lot of different things. I tried network marketing, which I made money, but I made all my friends run away from me. It really was a difficult first business to get into, but hey, I made some money, right? And it was one of the best boot camps you can ever have to get into business. I do recommend people that have no skills to do something like that, because you'll have some skills at the end. I went from there to selling life insurance, which I was good at, man, but like those conversations about, so you're going to die and you love your family, don't you? We wouldn't want anything to happen to them, would we? Those are, so I was making money doing that, but I wasn't feeling good as myself. I went from there to then private labeling and selling products on Amazon. But I made a mistake where I gave too many people my promo code, and all of my products are gone in about 20 minutes, and I was actually negative in terms of the money I made. So I was like very quickly out of business in all these businesses in like a 2.5 or 3 year basis. And in 2014, I started a podcast called Rock Your Life. It was horrible. I quit it in about 60 days. It was literally trash, because it was like this very like life coachy, like, you ever see the movie Blades of Glory? With Will Ferrell and John Heder. Yeah. So there's a quote every time they call John Heder's cell phone. His name's Jimmy in the movie, and he picks it up. His voicemail is, "My name's Jimmy, and if you can dream it, you can do it." That's how this podcast was. It was that bad, and like I'm the furthest thing from that, right? Like I'm a very real, like, come on, man, what's wrong with you? Why can't you do it type of person. So like this podcast lasted about 60 days, and it just didn't really go well. So then in 2015, I did a trip to Peru. I actually was like, upcoming entrepreneur leader, and I spoke all over the country and did a lot of these different things. And I was like, wow, that was very cool. It got me out of my space. And I was like, let's try this podcasting thing again. And so then later in 2015, I launched Create Your Own Life. We had 30,000 or 10,000 downloads in our first 30 days, and had a lot of success there. It left other people saying, hey, can you do this for me? So we actually started a company called Slate Media Productions, where we put together a podcast, did all this different stuff. And like, God bless you, man, because that's a lot of damn work, and it was too much work for me. So our clients were actually like, hey, we like this one thing you're doing, and that was getting people on podcasts as part of our launch program. So we just started focusing on that. I had a co-founder. We worked for 9 months. We made, multiple six figures in our first 9 months. We didn't see eye to eye, and that was the end of the company. That company was called Get Featured. And I had to figure out in the next 2 months, like how to make money and pay the staff, which I had retained from the previous company. Yeah. And that's where Command Your Brand came from, was basically a company that had done well. We didn't get along. We had to go do our own thing, and I had to figure out how to keep doing what I was doing. And that was in 2017. And since then, we've grown a team of nearly 20. We've booked clients on thousands of podcasts, and we've had a lot of fun doing it, man.
Awesome. So there's a lot to kind of unpack here. I want to go back to something that really piqued my interest. 10,000 downloads in the first 30 days. Uncommon. Most people are not even anywhere near that. What do you attribute your success to? How were you able to accumulate that many downloads in the first 30 days? And let me actually preface this a little bit, because that I think was much more common if you were like right in on podcasting when it first started. Like if you started podcast in 2008, like you were going to be able to get downloads like that much more easily. 2015, podcasting is competitive. So it's really hard.
2015 was like that second wave, though. It was kind of that second wave where it got a little bit easier for a bit, and I think we're kind of in the third or fourth wave now.
Mm-hmm. So go into a little bit more detail on what do you mean by that third or fourth wave?
Well, so sometimes it's better to be lucky. It's better to be, lucky than good, right? Like, because, the more you work at something, you're bound to get lucky eventually. So part of it is luck, and part of it is the work I put in to get there. So when I had originally launched that first podcast called Rock Your Life, as I said, it was horrible. I had like 17 listeners in the 3 months I did it. And the thing that I thought at that point in time is you just do an episode, you put it out in your social media, and people find you. And I found out very quickly that's just not how it works.
No.
So this was, as I said, in 2015. So New and Noteworthy was still a thing. Like it was still open during that point in time. And basically what happened is you got 8 weeks of promotion for free from Apple Podcasts if you could just hit that New and Noteworthy. So my goal was to do that. So I took a course by Andrew Farabee. He's the host of the Knowledge for Men podcast called the Podcast Blueprint. Very good course. and it was like $97, and I feel like the guy could have charged $1,000 for it. But like, it taught me a lot about like the logistics of getting out there and getting attention and things like that. So I realized like I was going to have to promote the hell out of this thing, and if I failed, it was going to be because I didn't try, not because I didn't try enough. So I got this thing together, and I realized that the two main things that were going to rank the show were subscribers. And reviews are good for social proof, but they don't do a ton to rank you. But subscribers are really, really important because these algorithms, and they've changed a little bit in the last couple of years, but at that point in time, it was a ratio of the new subscribers you could gain in 24 hours to the current subscribers you had to your show. That growth percentage could jump you in charts.
Yeah.
So knowing that, I push people to rate and review my podcast and subscribe to my podcast. So what I did is I didn't have very much of a social media following at that point, but I did have a decent following on LinkedIn that I had built up from all the network marketing stuff I had done. So I sent out 3,000 individual messages by hand. You know, I didn't know there was a thing called automation at that point in time. So I spent like 12 hours doing this, but I was like, hey, you know, this is what I'm trying to do with this. You know, please subscribe, rate, and review to this show. Please don't mark me as spam. If you're not interested, just ignore it or tell me to go away. Like, just don't mark it as spam. So I had a lot of success with the LinkedIn. I had, because what I was able to monitor is the number of reviews I was getting, right? So I used I knew subscribes was the most important thing, but it's hard to tell unless somebody screenshots it and sends to you if they're subscribing. Right. So if I saw review numbers go up, I knew I was doing the right thing. So that was the first thing I did. Then I reached out to people. Go ahead.
I do want to highlight something here, Jeremy, which is really important. The first 8 weeks of your launch are still very important, right? Because
vital.
It's absolutely crucial. And I was working with a client the other day, and they're like, hey, my show is live. I just don't have any episodes yet. Or they had like one episode, and I was like, nah, you see, you got it. So when you're
start with
launched,
3 or 4, man, because you got to create listing habits.
Yeah, exactly. 3 or 4. And then, because as soon as you launch your show, for me, you go from, you make this transition from being in your production phase to your promotion phase.
Yes.
And like you said, that is the most common misconception. People are like, if I make it, they will come. And you got to get in there. You got to DM. You got to.
It's not happening, Kevin Costner. It is not happening, Kevin Costner. If you build it, they will not come.
Right. So you got to do it right. All right, cool. So you've taken this time. You're sending out thousands of DMs to get eyeballs and ear holes. So
I did the same thing on Facebook too. And I got to, I think the number was about 500, and they just like shut you off. They're like, you cannot send this link to anyone anymore. So I'm like, okay, so I guess that's the end of that. So I moved from there to then I had built a small email list. I think it had like 700 people on it. So I actually sent out individual emails because, you know, if you send it out from a list, you have to worry about SMTPs and all that stuff, and you could get spammed and whatever. So I sent out individual emails, man, like another like 12-hour task to try and do that. So that was where I went from there. I then went actually to texting the link with directions to every single person in my phone. So I had a lot of success there, believe it or not. Here's the final step, right? Because as I said, you got to be willing to like really push this. Is then, you know, we'd go out to like with friends, and I would like grab their phone and show them how to do it. Like, okay, cool. Now write the review, and I'm going to help you submit it. So like I did this with like, you know, 30, 40 friends every time we were out. And within that first kind of initial 2 weeks, I had garnered 64 reviews of my new podcast. So to me, I knew 64 reviews means I got a lot more subscribers than that, right? Because you're going to have a percentage of people that fall off and just don't do that other step. And I hit new and noteworthy. So during that point, for the next 8 weeks, I was featured. And that's where I got a lot of my new traffic was, okay, I know if I can get here, it's going to promote me. And that's what I was able to do. Now, that strategy's changed a lot now because for 2 years, new and noteworthy was locked. And, you know, now it's also just not the same in terms of like what it does for you to get out there and get attention. So to really get attention, it's doing a lot more of what I did in the beginning. You know what I mean? Like you have to do a lot more of what I did in the beginning to get attention now because it's a lot harder.
Yeah. Yeah, very well said. You know, it's also, I've been watching this other show. It's called NFT for Noobs, and Rich Cardona and Heather Parody are the hosts of this, and they're experienced podcasters. They've had, you know, good podcasts, but this NFT podcast has taken off. They've gotten, I mean, I think within the first several weeks, they got to 100,000 downloads, and then a month later it was 200,000. And I was thinking about that because, you know,
well, they have established audiences too from their own podcast, so that actually extremely helps them.
Well said. Well, very well said. You know, leveraging your existing network just like you did is super important.
And they also have I know Rich also has a pretty active room on what is that app?
Clubhouse.
Clubhouse, where he uses my company name as his room name. But I know that's pretty helpful too.
Yep. Well, Rich is like, and one of the interesting things that I was talking to Rich about on this topic was, people see that quick success, like, oh, it's amazing. And I'm like, well, it's because Rich has built up not only his network, but his skill set over the past decade that allowed him to execute on that, which is really important.
Because the content has to be good too, right? Like you're not going to get 100,000 downloads of dog poop. Like it has to be like good quality stuff that people find value to. Like step 1 is getting out to people. Step 2 is it's good content that helps people so they tell other people. And I find that whether it's people starting their own show or going on other shows, like people have this idea, okay, if I just get in front of X number of people, this number of people are going to opt in my list, this number of people are going to buy my product. Well, if all those things leading up to it are bad, then it doesn't really matter. Like it has to be a lot of action, but also it has to be good content. And, those guys have good content.
Yeah. You'll have a really high bounce rate if you've got, a really, kind of like, keyword rich show, which I do think is another interesting point about keywords, because I've been doing, obviously if you're in the podcasting and marketing space, you need to understand keywords and search. The NFT search rate over the past 30, 60 nights is insane. On YouTube alone, there were 14 million searches for NFTs last month. Okay. And so I just think it's a really interesting space to be in. I think that, it's new. There's a lot of spam out there. There's a lot of fake. There's a lot of con artists in that particular space. So if you come about it the right space and you're leveraging keywords, you can get a nice bump too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think there's a lot going there for creators in the future, but I think at the same time, people are just running there because a lot of people are running there. So I'm kind of like, people are like, oh, buy my, Bitmoji monkey. And it's like, is that thing really worth $14,000? I just don't see it. But I think for creators, there's a lot of value there for people to be able to invest in what you're creating. So I think it has a long tail thing, but I think it's going to change a lot because right now people are running to what looks like they're going to make a lot of money up front rather than thinking long term with this stuff.
That very, very well said. It reminds me of the internet boom in 2000 or the internet crash in 2000, where everyone's investing in all these internet companies and then 99% went to zero. But there's definitely something there. It's something I'm very interested in. I do kind of want to shift topics, Jeremy. I want to switch to your bread and butter. At Command Your Brand Media, your expertise is finding interesting, awesome people and basically making them podcast celebrities, right? Mm-hmm. You're booking them on high caliber shows, which you've actually done a really good job of doing as well.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
And I think that most everybody understands that being a guest on other podcasts is a great way to drive traffic to my podcast or to my business. But what I think a lot of people don't understand is what to do when they actually start recording. So if I let's say that I am planning on going on a podcast here as a guest soon, what are some best practices? What are some things that I can do to make sure that I actually achieve what I want to achieve?
Well, the first thing that's really important, Mark, and as a host, you'll really appreciate this, is showing up and first of all, knowing who you're talking to, right? If I got on and called you Bob Savant, like that wouldn't be very cool. And you immediately piss the host. That you immediately anger the host, right? It's like, you don't have to know somebody's whole backstory and everything they do, but it's important to know who they are, what their realm of business is, and just some of the people they talk to on their show. Like, you don't have to know everything they do, but just be aware of the space you're walking into. Like for me, I love when I get the pitch emails that pitch me by my middle name. I only use my middle name because somebody else has the same full name as me. So I just use it to rank in Google. So it's important to know who you're talking to have that method of respect for this, because Mark's created the show. He's worked on it for a very long time, and you're coming in and you're there to offer value. You're not coming in and this doesn't become your show, right? But I think a lot of people have that idea. So first of all, it's understanding that. The second thing is finding out exactly what they want to talk about. Sure, there's a reason they were interested in you, but when you and I first got started here, I asked you hey, how can I serve your audience today, right?
Yep.
Because it's important to make sure what I want to talk about and what you want to talk about may be two different things, or they may be close enough that we can kind of make them marry. But I need to know why you're having me here and why I can do the most value for you. Because then you're going to be more excited about the episode. You're going to be more interested in promoting it. You and I are going to have a better conversation. And you know what? I'll be able to talk about more of the things I want to talk about because we're on the same page and I'm here to help. So it's really important to show up that way. So those are the things that I find that 95% of people don't do. They're more interested in the other things of what do I talk about? How do I promote it? How to do those things? But how you show up is vital to how this whole thing works, because if you don't show up right, none of it works. So that's kind of part one. Part two is when you're talking about things, you want to answer questions and things like that through the method of story. Because I find far too often people focus on like, the bits and the bumps of it, like, like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And oftentimes something that's more impactful is when you tell a story. Like I remember when I hit this part in my podcast growth and I was like, oh man, is anybody really listening? And I thought about that, and this is why I bought into it, and this is what you can do too. So you want to find a way to answer questions in the method of story, because it helps people to buy into what you're doing. And it's a pneumatic device. Like people remember things more because they're hearing the story with it. It makes it more real to them. So that's one of the second things that you do. The other thing is as well is having one clear cut call to action, which is funny because this is what you did on my show yesterday. Is you're like, you can find me all these places, but this is the one place you can go, because you know why? I give one clear cut call to action. You actually said that. And that's vital, because I find people are really, really confusing on like what to do at the end of an interview. They're like, I have this website, I have these 17 emails, here's my grandmother's address. Like they give you every single thing you could never want to know about that person. So like what you really need to do is focus on the single place where, somebody can go at the end of an interview. And one of the things we love to tell people is buy a Vanity URL for a couple different reasons. One, we had a client once, awesome guy, Lance Ecios, great guy. Most people cannot spell his last name. So he'd be like, hey, come check me out, lancecios.com. And it was like, got to buy something easier, man. $13, buy like workwithlance.com or hangoutwithlance.com or successwithlance.com. For the first reason is to make it easier for people to find you. Here's the second reason you're going to do that. You can swap out the offers, because what you give as the offer now may be a different offer 6 months from now. And it still keeps all those old podcasts relevant because you're able to actually go to the offer that was swapped out. So these are things you need to be thinking with. And then making sure that you're bringing people into a community and not just looking for a sale from an interview. And I think far too often people think of it that way.
That I actually haven't heard that before, Jeremy. The custom vanity domain is super.
I can't take credit for that, by the way. I got that idea from somebody else. So shout out to George Bryant out there. That was definitely his idea. Can't take credit for that one myself.
Super smart. I can't tell you how many times I'll try to find someone's website and it's like, meet_me dash. And it's like,
dude, I hate those where the people like, they didn't have the URL they wanted. So they have like a dash, an underscore, in the URL. And like, how's anybody going to remember that?
Yeah. If you're doing that out there, God bless you, because you're losing a lot of traffic. I don't know how else to tell you.
www.&/**.com.
I think that for me is one of the reasons why at the end of a show or during a show, you only want to give that one call to action, because you want to reduce as much friction as possible. You want to make it as easy as possible for someone to execute on that one thing that you're doing. What about?
Can I just add one thing to that too, Mark, because I think people have a wrong perception when they're thinking about this stuff too, whether it's launching a new product on their own show or going on another show to talk about it. And you have to realize like, outflow equals inflow, right? The amount of promotion you put out, no matter where you put out, is going to make money come in, is going to make sales come in. I think too often people will look at a particular podcast and you're like, all right, I went on 12 podcasts and you know what? Only 4 people went through my link, but our sales went up astronomically, because yes, you give people an opportunity and you want to give people a way they can connect with you. But let's say they want to connect with you on Instagram. Let's say they want to go find you on Facebook. They're going to do it in other ways. They're going to tell other people about it. So you need to remember that just outflowing and just promoting is going to bring in more for you. It's not always going to be exactly from that opt-in, but I think that's what people get their attention stuck on.
Well, I mean, okay, so that's a really good point. You're talking about, basically you're talking about cash flow in a way, or at least that's what I got from is having that cash flow. We do kind of live in this world of a pay to play, but I think a lot of people are afraid to actually invest in themselves, How important do you think it is that you have an actual landing page before you actually go on this tour, if you would?
Well, it's important enough, right? Because when you're learning something, there's 2 parts to it, right? There's the theory of it, and there's actually like what you're going to do. I don't know about you. I learn more by doing things.
Yes.
So you want to give people an opportunity to do that. So I always tell them what you give away should be something that helps people apply what you just taught. Not a 370 page ebook, because like the last thing people need is another ebook. You want to give them a tool, a worksheet, a quiz, something that's going to help them to apply what you just taught, a checklist, like something easy. And you're going to have a percentage of people that opt in for that. But I'm going to be honest with you, it's going to be a low percentage. But the fact that you're promoting, people will find you, whether it's through the SEO you're increasing, whether it's through other podcasts that they're now finding on because of the one you did. So you need to realize like, this is going on podcasts as a guest is a PR action. The more promotion you do, the more comes in. Does it always come in from the exact area you think it's going to come? Usually not. But you want to have that opportunity for the people that are ready for that thing to go grab that thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it, again, the cool thing about podcasts is they live in perpetuity, basically.
Correct.
So someone could find I definitely find podcast when I'm going through Google search and stuff. The podcast released 5 years ago and I could still listen to it. And like you said, if you've got that custom vanity domain, it's all good. It's still relevant.
Yeah.
It's still relevant. So I want to actually shift to what a podcast guest maybe should do after the show, because I don't know about you, Jeremy, but there's been times where I have a great conversation with someone, we're vibing, we're riding, everything is good. But then after the podcast, it's like I never actually hear or talk to that person ever again. Like I'll send them an email, the show is live, why don't you check it out? And they just ghost me, like how important do you think that, and let's recontextualize this a little bit, considering my goal in guesting on that show is to drive my business, is to drive awareness for my business. How important is that post-podcast stuff, or is that just asinine as a whole?
Well, so this goes back to kind of the first thing we were talking about there. If like you're thinking about how am I going to help this person, how am I going to build a relationship, you're naturally going to do those things. But there are guests that just kind of do this like, you can only imagine how their dating life must be, because this is what they do. They do with all these podcasts. They're on like, all right, next. So there are people like that. And I feel sorry for those people. I do. But like, it should be about, how you can serve and build a relationship and things like that. And when you're doing that, you go on podcasts that are in the right niche. And naturally, when you do that, those are going to be people you can do partnerships with. You may have clients for each other. You may have things you want to do. Like we've had clients that have spoken at people's events, all sorts of great things, because they're thinking of how they can build a relationship with that person. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. If you're a one-man band, it is very hard to do that. So it may involve, getting an assistant, building a team around you to help you with doing these things and continuing to build those relationships. But you need to be thinking about how you can continue to add value to people, because they are influencers in the same space you're an influencer in.
Well said. And the other cool thing that I just want to give Jeremy a shout out. I was doing research and I was visiting his website. He actually lists and has links to episodes that he was on, to shows that he was on in the past. And I could tell you, as someone who gets a lot of people that reach out that want to be on my show, if I go to your website and I'm researching, I see that actually you're giving shout outs to previous shows that you were on, I'm way more likely to want to collaborate with you as a host. Way more.
I've got to find a better way to store that though, because like I'm not gonna I've done a lot of podcasts. I don't want to say, oh yeah, I've done a million of them. But like one of the things is I've used the cover art, but the page is just obnoxiously long. So I need to find a better way to. I do need to find a better way to store it to make it easier for listeners to go check them out. But yeah, I appreciate that. It's definitely something we've tried to keep up with. It's hard to keep up with.
No, it is. But I think if I could encapsulate this episode with one key topic, it's if you give value, you get value. And I think if you're guesting on a show, that's really where you want to be.
That's what it's all about, man. Like you want to treat other people the way you want to be treated. And I think that's really what it comes down to, man. It's kind of like the basics of life here, the golden rule.
It's getting back to the simple, the basics. Well said. Jeremy, where can everybody find you? Because we need to know more. I need to know more about what Jeremy's doing next. Where can we find you?
So they can check us out over at crushitonpodcast.com, and they'll find a link there called the 7 Reasons You're Not Getting Booked in Your Favorite Podcast. It's going to go over all the basic PR things that you need to know to get rocking and rolling. So that's crushitonpodcasts.com.
Brilliant. Link below, ladies and gentlemen. Jeremy, thanks for joining the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Mark.
Boom. And that is a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining the After Hours Entrepreneur today. Thank you for taking action. Thank you for listening and taking action. Make sure, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. That is a huge help for me. And you know what? Do something for you. take some of the things that we've learned here in this episode today and take action. Go take the action, whether that means setting up that Vanity URL, whether that means connecting with someone great, whether that means trying to get on other podcasts. Take these tools and go and execute. Take the action today. Until then, catch you here next time on the After Hours Entrepreneur. Peace.